Good evening, everybody. We are continuing the test, the comparison between the Oriolus BA300s and the Little Bear B4x. These are both portable tube amplifiers that ostensibly provide balanced signal. Only one of these two actually does provide balanced signal, and then that is the BA300s. This has balanced in and out. So it feeds in balance from 4.4 millimeter and it feeds out from 4.4 millimeter. The B4x has a 3.5 unbalanced 3.5 input. It's got balanced circuitry on the inside, and it has a 3.5 unbalanced output into the headphone. Now, this here is a 3.5 millimeter to 4.4 millimeter adapter. This is not balanced. This is so that I can listen to our earphones of choice, which is this, the FIO FH5. This is the earphone, IEM, headphone, whatever you want to call it, that we have been using so far in the testing, and so we're going to continue using it. I've had both units warmed up for about 7 to 8 minutes, so the tubes should be nice and toasty so that we can actually hear the character of each unit. Let's get to our songs. The player that we're using is the Sony NW-WM1A, and every time I have to say it, I have to look at the label down here because I have no idea what the hell this thing is called, because Sony does a terrible job naming any and all of its products. So the first song we're going to test for the mids, we're on the mids test, is going to be Churches. And what is going on here? Why is this not working now? Oh, hold switch is on. Thank you. We're going to be testing The Mother We Share from the album The Bones of What You Believe by Churches. So here we go. Would be a good idea to plug in the headphones. That helps in the testing. Volume is at 68. I'm going to increase the volume to about 80. I hear no distortion, I hear no noise, I hear no loss of information from the tubes, meaning there's no distortion that makes it sound like there's jittery volume or anything like that, or jittery music. Now at this point, which is I think about 40 seconds of the song, what happens is that you have the drum playing and a bass guitar and the mids, the vocalists, and they start blending, so the vocal is not particularly clear to hear. You can hear her, but it's hard to separate her tonality from the rest of the mix, which is exactly what tubes are supposed to do, by the way. Tubes muddle things up, they have a warmer presentation, they increase the bass. So if you're looking for clean representation, you should just use the player and not hook up any tube amplifier to it. Okay, so let's stop. And now we're going to switch to the B4x. Okay, so the first thing that I noticed immediately, just like last time, is that the B4x has more noticeable hiss than the 300. The 300 has hiss. It's just less audible than it is on the B4x. So let's play the song. I'm going to increase the music or the volume on the B4 to about 80% here. And here we go. I'm going to increase the maximum on the player, on the tube amplifier. The volume here on the player is 68. That's about the same volume as the B4, or excuse me, the 300 was at 80. I'm going to skip ahead to about 40 seconds when everything comes in, the drum, the bass guitar, and the vocalist. So far it sounds exactly the same as the B4 or the 300 did. The bass response in the mix sounds fairly close, although there's a slight less lingering in the bass on the B4X. It appears to me that the B4X's representation of the mids of the vocals is a little bit cleaner, just a little bit easier to find in the mix than it is on the 300. If for example, let's assume that the Sony here is the bass, right? And the vocalist is right ahead in front of the mids. The B4 presents it right here, whereas the 300 presents it like a step or a half a step back. So the 300's expression, the representation of the mids, is a little more recessed than it is on the B4X. Other than that, the tonality sounds the same to me. There might be slight differences, but they're not audible to me. The hissing that was present in the B4 when I first plugged in the headphones without playing anything, inaudible at this point. I can't hear it at all. Okay, let's stop. Now that the music is stopped, I can hear that hiss. That hiss doesn't fade when I decrease the volume. It stays exactly the same. Okay, so let's try one more song. Let's go back and in our playlists, let's go to Natalie by Milk and Bone, and we're going to listen to that song. It's called Natalie. And by the way, all these songs are in FLAC. The song starts out with a bass guitar. And right now in the song, I can hear the hissing in the B4X. But as the volume comes up, and now it's at normal volume, that hissing has disappeared. I can't hear it. And here comes the vocals. A hauntingly start. Goes, ooh, 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 ooh. And it's a great song. That bass undertone doesn't blend with her vocality, her tonality. So I can clearly hear her despite that bass guitar still playing in the background. Now she's saying, I never meant to hurt you. Please never go away. And there's a backup vocalist in the background that's just singing ooh, ooh, ooh. So I could hear their separate tonalities. The backup vocalist is definitely more faint. The primary vocalist is up front. The bass guitar is all the way in the back, recessed. We're about 1 minute and 30 seconds in. I'm going to fast forward to about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And now we have a crescendo. Now the drum is playing harder. The backup vocalist is still saying ooh, ooh, ooh. Those two, the bass and this backup vocalist, clearly separated. Here comes the primary vocalist. And I can hear the primary vocalist really well. The melding of the frequency between the bass and the mids is not to the degree where it seems as if the vocalists are shoulder to shoulder with the bass. I would say that the vocalist is at least a step or two steps at least ahead of the bass. Excellent representation of her vocals. Okay, let's stop. And we are going to switch to the Oriolus. Okay. Again, with the Oriolus plugged in, no music, I hear the hiss, less audible than it is on the B4X. And let's play again. Volume is at 68. I'm going to increase to try to volume match to 80. The bass seems to have a slightly longer reverberation on the 300. Seems to have a slight more boost to it than on the B4x. And here comes the vocal, the backup singer that's saying ooh, ooh, ooh. And at this point, I can't hear any hiss at all. In fact, the hiss disappeared sooner on the 300 than it did on the B4x. Here comes the primary vocalist now. Frankly, I'm having a hard time distinguishing the vocals from the 300 and the B4x. They're very, very similar. If I had to nitpick, I would say that because of the slightly more boosted bass on the 300, there's a little bit more melding in the midtones on the 300 than there is on the B4x, but it's teeny tiny, very, very slight. It sounds, for all intents and purposes, the same as the B4x. I'm going to skip ahead to about halfway in the song at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And now the bass is playing, the drum playing at a higher volume. You have the backup vocalist going ooh, ooh, ooh. And the primary vocalist is going to come in any second. The only thing is that the vocals seem maybe a half step behind, further back than they did on the B4x. It's just a tiny, tiny difference. Very smooth vocals, so on the 300, same thing with the B4x. The tonality doesn't change between the two. Okay. And let's do one last song. Let's go to Lana Del Rey, Ultraviolence, and we're going to play the song Ultraviolence. And I'm going to skip ahead to 1 minute. You have the drum, the electric guitar, and her voice. And it's really hard to hear her clearly. It's melded, I mean, to the extreme where it's just distorted to heck. And it's very, very difficult to figure out what she's saying. All I heard is ultraviolet. And now when the bass has stopped, her voice comes out clear. Absolutely no problem. I could hear the piano cleanly, clearly. I can hear what seems to be an echo to her voice. And the bass is going to come back here. And as soon as the bass comes back, her voice just gets lost, melding way too much. Very difficult to hear what she's singing. Okay. So let's stop. And we're going to switch to the B4x. I'm going to increase the volume to max. The volume on the player automatically goes back to 68, and here we go. They're almost exactly volume matched. I'm going to skip ahead to about the midway, 2 minutes in. You got the drum, you got the electric guitar, you got her voice. And I would say her voice on the B4X is just a little bit cleaner, just a tiny bit. That melding of the frequency is not as intense as it was on the 300. It's just a teeny tiny difference. I mean, some people, depending on your ears and your gear, you might find that they sound exactly the same, and I can understand that. And it's just a teeny tiny difference where the B4X presents the vocal just a half a step further ahead than the 300 did. In all other respects, they sound the same to me. I hear no other difference. The bass response, like I said on the 300, is a tiny bit longer, just a little bit, but nothing earth-shattering. Okay. So, let's talk about conclusions. You know, I have said from the beginning that you have to be very, very mindful of the pricing of a product. That just because something costs an exponentially greater price than something else doesn't mean you're getting exponentially better experience out of it. My concern about people who jump up and down and cry balance, balance, balance is that I don't think they really understand the purpose of balanced signal. See, it makes no sense, in my opinion. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure somebody will, but it makes absolutely no sense to have a balanced tube amplifier. I don't get it. What is the purpose of this? Once you get a clean signal out of the player and put it into a tube amplifier, it's going to do its tubey thing, add distortion and warmth and change the tonality. So who cares if it's not ultimately 100% clean? What difference does it actually make? I mean, does it make an audible difference for you? We just did the test. It doesn't make an audible difference. There are slight, teeny tiny differences. And frankly, depending on where you come from, what type of music you like, you may find that the 300, this is the 300, you may find that the 300 is not the type of tonality you want because the B4X seems to have just a little bit more clean sound, meaning better detail separation, better separation of the tonalities, right? You can hear the vocals a little bit cleaner. Yeah, only a half step ahead, I understand, but it's still a half step. And at worst, you could say it's exactly the same. Well, then if it's exactly the same, what's the point of having a 4.4 balance? What's the point of going through all the hassle of first buying this thing at $450, $475 MSRP, then buying the appropriate cables at $60 a piece, by the way, if you don't have a player with a 4.4 out, and then playing it that way. Oh, and by the way, getting a 4.4 out for your headphone. So at least $60 for this cable, probably at least another $60 for the cable for whatever headphone that you have that requires a 4.4 termination. So now $120 in cables plus the player, or excuse me, the amplifier. So you went from $450 to $570. You understand? You just increased your cost for no reason, to get no real benefit out of it. Now you could say, look, NTR, you have no idea what you're talking about. Balance is the most amazing thing ever, and if you don't listen to balance, you're not a real audiophile. Great. You keep that opinion, and that's totally your call, your opinion to have. It's totally fine. But if you feel that way, then go out and buy the BA300s. Go ahead and buy that. Nobody's stopping you. My point is, between the two, the tonalities are not different enough. You may like the 300S, the way I've described it, more than the Little Bear. I understand, that's fine. If you like it, you like it. But is it justified to have a half-step difference? Is it justified to spend hundreds of dollars more for that tiny difference that you could, by the way, very likely mimic in EQ? if you know how to EQ, if you have a player that allows EQ. Is it worth it to you? And I'm not quite sure that most reasonable people would say, you know what, for that tiny half step, I definitely want the 300S. Okay. Now you can find other reasons to justify the 300S over the Little Bear. The build quality, I think, is probably easily better than the 300 or the Little Bear. It keeps confusing these two because they sound so similar. It's smaller, clearly. It's, you know, and frankly, it just looks a lot better, in my opinion. I like just the easy presentation. So, you know, the visual presentation. Very simple. Whereas this, you got a knob at the top, you got this big clunky rectangle thing, you got a little window that shows a little too much, and, you know, it's just all gimmick, and it can break, and you know, this thing makes noise on the inside, a metallic sound every time you put it down on a surface. I mean, this does too, but not to the same extent as this. As the Little Bear. My opinion is that the mids, for all intents and purposes, are basically the same. You're not getting exponentially better sounding tube presentation from the 300S by spending $400 more. That's not what's going on. It's just, sorry, I don't see it. I don't hear it. I don't see it. I don't find the justification for it. I hope that this has been of some help. Anybody who's been considering between these two portable amplifiers, you know, these are obviously luxury items. One is far more luxurious than the other, and you have to make a decision financially. If you had these two back to back and listen A and B, you can probably find some differences. As I've said, there are differences. It's just that you have to justify the $400 hike. And when you're talking about minor differences, that $400 hike is simply hard to swallow, hard to justify. And on top of that, the whole balance thing is just such a pointless gimmick. I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't hear it. If you like this content, if you like any of my other content, then please do consider joining me on Patreon. I currently have 11 wonderful, amazing, very giving patrons who give me just a little bit of their hard-earned money once a month. If you could find it in yourself to join the Patreon family and give me just $2 a month, I would truly appreciate it. Your donations go to helping me save up more money so that I can buy products like these and give you a true, honest, unfiltered, unbiased opinion about what I hear so that you can make a knowledgeable, logical decision whether to buy that product or not. If you are a regular viewer but you haven't subscribed, hey, think about subscribing. We are now at $5.97. Ladies and gentlemen, $5.97, that's fantastic. If we could have just a few more people subscribe, we'll get to 600 within no time. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you want me to review a piece of gear that I currently own, there is a review request form in the description section below. Go ahead and click on that, fill it out, and I'll get to your review request as soon as I possibly can. I hope all of you have a wonderful, amazing, just fantastic end to this long weekend. Long week. Sorry. A great end to your week and a beginning to a fantastic weekend. Take care.